Hello Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, Alias Guy. Well, we have a pile of stuff we're going to wrap through here today. You name it, from drug deals to kind of a little bit of touch on the fires. There's actually a really good conversation that went on about how Canada's going to be affected by this big, beautiful bill. I had brought this up in a previous episode. We got everything, like right down to EB, some Palestinians just breaking rules like it doesn't really matter because, yes, it's Canada. Opposition about mining up north. I mean, it's going to be an endless, quick, fast-paced. We're going to wrap through as many of these as we can. And let's just dive right in with this raw fentanyl bust. This is kind of crazy.
Well, this all began with a tip from the public about a man selling fentanyl in the town of Georgina. What followed was a 2-month-long investigation and the crackdown on a heavily armed crime ring that was allegedly peddling drugs from Toronto to Huntsville.
We don't have the exact quantities that are inside that fentanyl, but we believe that it's pure fentanyl, or as close to pure as you can get.
On display was a big baggie filled with 1,400 grams of raw fentanyl that was scooped up during Project Madruga. Large quantities of cocaine, meth, opioid pills, and illegal cannabis were also seized.
And I can tell you, no community in our region, our province, or across this country has been untouched by the opioid crisis that has swept through Canada over the past decade.
York Region's Gun and Gang Unit began surveilling a suspect back in February and quickly learned that the OPP was investigating the same group of people. Together, they executed 5 residential search warrants in Toronto, Newmarket, and Georgina. A storage locker was also raided. 4 men and 2 women have now been arrested and are facing a total of 53 charges.
Yeah, so our investigation didn't reveal any transportation into the United States. It was basically drug trafficking from Toronto all the way to Huntsville that we located. We don't know where it's manufactured, unfortunately.
Along with the drugs, a cache of weapons was also discovered, including 7 handguns, 4 shotguns, 4 rifles, and overcapacity magazines. Investigators tell me when those guns were seized, 9 were fully loaded.
I can say that they're very high powered. There's some very high powered guns that scare even the police.
Definitely a tool of the trade that drug traffickers use to enforce and expand their territories, and firearms are often used in other criminal offenses associated to drug trafficking, like robberies, assaults, and intimidations.
As the overdose crisis continues right across the country, York police believe this bust will likely save lives. And because the investigation was launched off a tip, they're calling on all communities to take a stand.
We're looking for the public to continue to help us, to continue to give us information on who's selling drugs and who's dealing with firearms, obviously. And that is the solution. We need the public's help in order to gather this information, and we can start investigations based on that.
Now, it's unknown how long this suspected drug trafficking ring was in operation, but police say case closed. They've arrested all the players allegedly involved.
Right. Guarantee one thing, there wasn't a single legal gun owner in the mix. There never is. Moving right along.
Good evening and thank you for watching. We now have the details of a major bust of contraband cigarettes and tobacco products in 6 nations. A total of 25,000 kilograms of contraband tobacco was seized with a street value of over $6 million. Other drugs and 15 firearms were also seized. CTV's Jeff Pickle joins us with more on this. And Jeff, public safety experts and business groups say illegal tobacco products are a major issue.
Well, Colton, from the business perspective, these outfits are undercutting legitimate businesses and they're not paying any taxes on these cigarettes. But when it comes to public safety, experts say it's more than just the selling of illegal goods. It's actually helping bankroll major organized crime groups. The bust took place on May 7th at an industrial park on Chiefswood Road on 6 Nations of the Grand River. The OPP say it's the work of a criminal network not connected to residents of 6 Nations. In total, Project Panda recovered 25,000 kilograms of contraband tobacco, 11.1 million cigarettes, with an estimated street value of $6.29 million.
It's a big issue, and this is a big bust. It's one of the bigger that I recall on record. And
according to former OPP Commissioner Chris Lewis, contraband tobacco is big business.
If people can buy it maybe a quarter of the price they'd pay for if they bought it at a store, they're going to buy it that way.
Lewis says this is often perceived as a less serious crime.
To some, they may think, well, this is pretty innocent. They made some money off tobacco. It's not innocent. It's organized crime. They do awful things in communities. So why should anything be allowed to happen that will help finance them in their illegal and dangerous activities?
In addition to the tobacco, police also recovered 15 guns, 1,300 pounds of cannabis, and over 3 kilograms of psilocybin.
We have a saying that contraband costs us all. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry that spans across Canada.
Convenience store owners say contraband nicotine sales are on the rise across Canada and say product price is a major reason.
People don't want to pay $180 for a carton of cigarettes. They would rather pay $50 or $60.
Yeah, nobody wants to pay the taxes anymore. We're all broke.
For the carton of cigarettes. So it's a very lucrative industry, and organized crime is, taking notice of this.
And although the sale of nicotine products is controversial, they say they just want a level playing field.
We like to see people quitting smoking. We really do. However, it's just, we're playing by the rules.
The Ontario government recently announced more funding and resources to combating contraband tobacco products. So far, no names or charges have been announced since the raid that took place over nearly 2 weeks ago. The former OPP commissioner suspects it's because the investigation is still ongoing and there could be more to come. Colton.
Yeah. Taxes. It's all taxes. People are tired of it. 25% of people living in poverty in Canada. Come on. It's craziness. And then there's no doubt with all the crime, because of the immigration, out of control immigration, that we got this going on.
The RCMP...
And actually, I reported on this a while ago, and it's actually nice to see mainstream finally pick it up. Finally. On a sub-channel. A little wee blip.
He released a 75-page ministerial briefing binder earlier this week. And it contains a clear message to the political powers that be that the National Police Force needs more, much more.
The government's demands on the RCMP, the briefing binder said, stretch the organization beyond its current capabilities and capacity. The RCMP cannot continue to effectively deliver on the full breadth of its federal mandate without addressing significant resourcing challenges. The good news for the RCMP, the Liberals campaigned on hiring more RCMP officers. A promise the Prime Minister said he would keep at his first press conference after winning.
We'll strengthen Canadian law enforcement by hiring 1,000 more RCMP officers and giving law enforcement more tools to fight crime.
I, Ruby Sahota, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare.
Carney named Brampton, Ontario MP Ruby Sahota Canada's first ever Secretary of State for combating crime.
It's a big priority for the Liberals and our government, and that is why.
Love that. Secretary of State. The guy's signing executive orders, changing the names to sound more American. Elbows up, everybody. Canada's gone. You voted for it. God, Secretary of State, what a joke in Canada.
You're seeing a focused role in this.
The RCMP briefing binder also identified violent extremism as a, quote, hot issue, along with foreign interference, hate crimes.
It's because it's up 488%. 488%. Yeah. The T word. Yeah, extremists. 488%.
Canada-U.S. border and opioids. But the RCMP warned the government, quote, the increase in violent extremism has not seen a parallel increase in resourcing.
Whether it's the additional RCMP officers, CBSA officers, or reform when it comes to bail and other issues, sentencing as well. There's a lot of work to be done.
In fact, the Liberal tough-on-crime agenda is an extensive one and includes not just more police officers and bail reform, but also new criminal code provisions for things like online exploitation of children or intimidation of those attending a place of worship. Liberal MPs have been telling me these last few days, Neetu, that they felt in the last campaign that they lost some votes and they lost some seats because Liberals were perceived as being soft on crime. And they intend to eliminate that vulnerability with a law and order agenda to be unveiled in next week's Speech from the Throne.
Now, did you catch all that propaganda? They were perceived to be. They're the ones that gave the bail no jail laws, reduced sentences, the Inequality Act, where if you're not white, you don't have to serve the time that a white person does. What do you mean perceived? They've destroyed Canada. Unbelievable. And then you've got the ridiculousness of this.
Montreal police have announced new procedures for officers who conduct police checks. It's being called part of a push to rebuild trust in the force. Now, Maria, what's changed?
Mitsumi, starting today, officers are now obligated to tell people during a police check that they're free to go, that they're not being detained. In the past, they've only been required to say the reason for the check. It's all part of the SPVM's response to concerns raised during consultations that racialized people are targeted more often than others. Here's the SPVM's director on that, as well as a reaction from the Center for Research Action on Race Relations.
You know, I'm going to be honest with you. Is this going to fix all the problems? Absolutely not. But it's a good step. It's a great and important and positive step to the right direction.
You have to make sure that the police officers will respect that duty to inform the person being stopped of those rights and opportunities, and that will be applied consistently.
The SPVM's director says this policy will be enforced through documentation. Officers have to note in their reports that they informed people of their rights. He adds that the force doesn't yet have data on how many officers may be systematically racially profiling, but they're working on it, and there are other initiatives underway. Things like hiring more diverse officers and making sure each station's priorities reflect the communities they serve. Mitsumi?
Thanks very much, Maria.
An absolute waste of time. What a joke. Jesus. Oh my God. Well, let's do a lighter side. On the lighter side.
Daniel, how did this happen?
Well, Marilee, the details of this lawsuit read like a movie script. It's a battle over a lottery ticket worth millions. And CTV News was actually there for what appeared to be one of the happiest days of this couple's lives as they accepted the big check.
Manitoba's newest lottery millionaire, Crystal McKay of Winnipeg.
In late January last year, Crystal McKay and then partner Lawrence Campbell were thrust into the spotlight after she won $5 million on a Lotto 649 ticket.
It was her birthday, and she's been asking me for like 3 weeks already just to get a ticket, but I never went and got one. And then we finally drove by one, and I was like, hey, I might as well just go get you one right now.
But now Campbell says that's not what happened, and he's suing his ex-girlfriend, claiming the ticket and money belonged to him. According to a claim filed in Manitoba's Court of King's Bench earlier this month, Campbell alleges he bought the ticket on January 19, 2024, and only asked McKay to hold on to it because he had recently lost his wallet. They hit the jackpot, $5 million, and met with a Western Canada Lottery Corporation agent. The lawsuit alleges Campbell was told he couldn't cash in because he didn't have ID. The suit says he was told McKay should sign the ticket and publicly claim the winnings.
Crystal, what are your plans for this big windfall?
What are my plans? Just take care of the family.
The claim says she then deposited the money into her bank account because Campbell didn't have one. Less than 2 weeks later, Campbell alleges McKay didn't return to the hotel room they were staying in. Campbell says he went out to find her and, quote, after some investigation, he found her in bed with another guy. The claim says McKay ended her relationship with Campbell and alleges she, quote, ghosted him by cutting off contact and taking out a protection order against him. Now he's asking for the $5 million because he bought the ticket and trusted McKay to hold on to the winnings for him. The allegations of the statement of claim have not been tested in court. In an email, McKay's lawyer told CTV News McKay disputes the allegations against her and will be filing a statement of defense. Both the Western Canada Lottery Corporation and Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries are also named as defendants in the lawsuit. It alleges WCLC gave Campbell bad advice and didn't warn him of the inherent risk of allowing his then partner to claim the winnings. Neither corporation has responded to a request for comment.
Daniel, any idea if and when this lawsuit will proceed?
Well, I was in court this morning, and the judge decided in a few weeks, merely after McKay files her defense. Representatives from all parties were there, and Campbell's lawyer was seeking an order to prevent McKay from selling or gifting anything of value. That motion was put over until June 13th.
All right, thanks for this, Daniel. Daniel, how did this...
Yeah. Unbelievable. Okay, now then you got this. Like, this is just ridiculousness. I gotta delete this. Like, are you serious? Driving into cars, oncoming traffic. I can't count how many laws they're breaking right here. There better be charges. I mean, they recorded it. There better be charges. This is ridiculous. Bloody Hamas. Jesus, Murphy. We're going to do an update. I got a couple on the fires.
The resort village of Candle Lake reissued its pre-evacuation alert on Sunday due to high winds and dry conditions.
The resort community, our summer is short.
Oh, 1 second here. I got some music playing here in the background. I can't have that. Try that again.
Residents, I think many of them have taken this second alert seriously. They are packed. They are watching and ready to go.
Mayor Colleen Lavoie says the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency relocated their fire crews to the village last night and that the community has been preparing meals for the firefighters.
The helicopters are fueling up here at the airstrip, and the firefighters are here to rest overnight, and many of them stayed in the campground. Many slept in their trucks.
As of Monday morning, the Public Safety Agency said the Shoe wildfire by Lower Fishing Lake was about 30,000 hectares in size, and the campfire north of Snowdon is now 50,000 hectares.
They're joined now, and my understanding is they're at least 4 times the size of the city of Saskatoon.
An evacuation for the resort subdivision of Wayland Bay was called last night due to extreme safety threats from wildfires. One evacuee told CTV they could see flames as they were leaving. The state of local emergency is in place until June 1st. At Little Bear Lake, crews are working to prevent structure damage by attaching sprinklers to the houses, digging fire breaks, and collecting propane tanks. Pelican Narrows issued a partial evacuation notice yesterday, which said the Pelican 2 wildfire was within 1 kilometer of the village. The notice alerted evacuees to head to Prince Albert. Late Monday afternoon, Highway 3 south of Prince Albert had to be closed as wildfires reduced visibility. Jasmine Pelche, CTV News.
That is some beautiful area up there. I had I'm quite the outdoorsman. I absolutely love it. And some of the best perch and walleye fishing I've ever done was up in that area. In Saskatchewan anyways. Absolutely fabulous, and it's cold water, really nice, tight, firm, hard fighting fish. Hopefully they can get ahead of these fires before too much devastation takes off. And let's just deal with this white shell now.
More Manitobans are being allowed back into the white shell. As of Sunday morning, residents, cottagers, commercial operators, and daily visitors were allowed to return to the Pointe de Bois area of the park. But the province is reminding people to be prepared to evacuate again on short notice if the situation changes. A state of local emergency is still in effect in Whiteshell Provincial Park campgrounds. Hiking trails and water routes are all closed, and a fire ban remains in place. This is the second round of people being allowed to return to the Whiteshell. Last week, the province reopened areas in the south part of the park, including Falcon and Barron Lakes. A Manitoba First Nation is evacuating some of its most vulnerable residents as an out-of-control wildfire burns nearby. In a social media post Sunday, Pimachikamak Cree Nation Chief David Monius says smoke has arrived in the Cross Lake area. The community, which is located 530 kilometers north of Winnipeg, is now focused on getting the elderly, those with respiratory illnesses, and children to Winnipeg. Provincial data shows there's an out-of-control wildfire near Cross Lake, which is roughly 1,500 hectares in size. Although Chief Monius called the fire stable in a social media post. So far, 216 people from the community are headed to Winnipeg and another 86 to Thompson. The community is receiving help from the Emergency Management Organization, the Red Cross, and the local emergency management team. More Manitoban.
And then we got Daniel Smith and the Alberta Conservatives doing some serious justice for parents in the school system and for the kids, and they're getting a lot of backlash for this. So I'm going to clarify this. Now, I can't show you a lot of the books, which I've been through. What I can show you, though, is, well, I can't show it to you, but I'm going to attach it like I do with all my videos. I put all the information down below. Just the facts. Sorry, just the facts. If you care to go through it, it's incredibly graphic. This is stuff they were showing like little kids in school. It's embarrassing. And now they're going on this whole media propaganda that they're banning books. Take a look at the file and tell me if you think kids under the age of 16 should be reading that. And then ask yourself, should kids under the age of 12 be reading that? And then ask yourself, should kids under the age of 8 be reading that? You be the judge. But what they did do is they are actually not banning them, they are giving an age appropriation to them. Kind of like when we were kids growing up, you know, with movies and books. And I remember the libraries, there was adult sections. You weren't even allowed to walk down there. If you got caught in there, they'd pull your library card for 2 weeks. Back then, that was a big thing. The library, man, you know, I spent every day in there. Last thing you wanted to do is lose that. That was like losing cable. It was like being cut off from the internet. Well, they're actually doing what needs to be done, and they're just literally putting age criteria on these books. I don't see anything wrong with it. In fact, I see everything right with it. So whenever you hear the other side, just share that link that I'm going to put down below and ask them if they'd read it to their kids. Or even better, print it off. And when you know you're going to be talking to somebody about it, you can hand it right to the parent and say, well, here, show your kids. See how they feel. It'll definitely shut them up real quick, or they'll prove to everybody they're not a very good parent if they're letting their kids read that type of, like, sexually explicit, nasty stuff. Now, moving right along, this is Kim Moody. He kind of explains what the big beautiful bill is going to do to Canadian investors as well as investors around the world, but he pretty much focuses on the Canadian end of it. And this is going to hurt everybody, from podcasters, YouTubers, to investors who are invested in real estate, or businesses that are run in both countries where they pay out in dividends. Let's take a listen to what he says here, because This is huge. This is like $83 billion it's going to cost just our economy. This is big. This is going to hurt. And it's all because of the censorship bills that the Liberals put in. They put the digital sales tax in, and they put the media bill in. So no outlet gets it unless they're the government says they're an actual media outlet. So again, this is all because of socialist idealism that they're gonna really the taxes. It's gonna decimate us. Just another one. It's just another one. Elbows up, everybody. Elbows up.
There's actually two things generally that the United States is concerned about. It's countries that have imposed what they refer to as unfair tax practices or taxes against American companies, like the digital services tax. But the other one that's in their crosshairs is the global minimum tax top-ups, which was spearheaded by the OECD and implemented by a number of countries like Canada. So presently we have...
And we were big pushers of that, by the way. I shouldn't say we, because nobody out west was. The Eastern Socialists were big pushers of this. The Liberal Party. The ones that, the East voted in again.
The digital services tax and the global minimum tax top-ups in Canadian law, and that is squarely the reason why this piece of legislation, Section 899 of this big beautiful bill, is trying to take aim at, and it could be fairly devastating if it ever gets passed.
How so? What might be an example of a devastating, to use your word, a devastating consequence?
Well, just very simply, if you have a let's say a retail investor that invests in U.S. stocks, for example, that pays dividends, or a U.S. bond that pays interest. Right now we have tax treaties in place to limit the amount of withholding tax that the U.S. can impose, and depending on who owns that, if it's an individual, that generally on dividends it's going to be 15%. Well, now that withholding rate could be as high as 30%. And in some cases higher. And so the issue is whether or not Canada will grant foreign tax credits for that extra tax. And under current law, it's pretty debatable. I would suggest the answer is probably no. And so it could result in some permanent tax leakage. So that's a retail investor. It can.
I just want to pause there, because the people who are watching this are in large measure retail investors, and many of them own shares of publicly traded U.S. companies, and many of those would receive dividends from those companies. So you're saying what? That effectively that flow of dividends from U.S. corporations is going to become less profitable for the Canadian investors who receive them, because the Canadian investors, will have to pay more tax on those dividends, correct?
Correct. If Canada is labeled what I refer to as a bad country, then yes, there could be some permanent tax leakage if Canada doesn't grant relief on that, which under existing law, it doesn't look like it would.
Okay, what about Canadian companies that might be operating in the United States?
Very similar result. If you have a Canadian company that has U.S. operations through let's say a U.S. subsidiary, any dividends that would normally be returned to Canada, like the Canadian parent company, in most cases by way of treaty of 5% withholding rate, could be as high as 30% as well, and which again would be devastating. And the other issue is if they're not operating through a subsidiary, but let's say they're just operating directly out of their Canadian company. Well, there's what's referred to as a branch tax, which tries to mimic the otherwise dividend if it was operated through a company. That would be at a much, much higher rate as well, which would be devastating as well. The other issue is whether or not tax-exempt pension funds would be subject to this new rule, and it looks like they would be, like the Canada Pension Plan, who holds great amount of investments in the U.S., as I understand it. Those could now be subject to tax on any U.S. source earnings, whereas right now by treaty they're exempt, and so that would be pretty devastating.
Okay,
that one will be huge, and yes, it does fall under this tax act. It's been brought up on a couple of different shows that I've watched. I can't. There's a big differentiate between what I've seen in a few different shows, but well, for all you boomers, elbows up, right? This is gonna crush your investments, big time.
So the implications are, the potential implications are profound. How do you think Canada should be responding here? And we all understand, of course, that Canada's got its hands full right now to responding in a number of ways to new U.S. policies.
Well, I wrote about this back when Donald Trump got elected in November. I said that Canada really has to take a hard look at how competitive from a tax perspective they are currently and what's to come. And frankly, now, what's to come is coming to fruition, and there's probably going to be more. And so what should Canada do? Well, ideally, we drop the digital services tax and the global minimum top-ups, but that's easier said than done politically for a variety of reasons. At the minimum, what needs to happen is certainly some negotiations to make sure that Canada does not get labeled as a so-called bad country. That would be a minimum.
What should let's circle back for our final question to retail investors. What should they be doing? They should be following this story closely. Obviously, they should follow what happens to the so-called big beautiful bill in Congress. It's now in the Senate, and changes are certainly possible. So they should be paying close attention. What should they be doing if these changes become U.S. law?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head here. At a minimum, you need to follow it, and certainly it's going to be in for a ride, perhaps a rough ride in the Senate. So, but if it does get passed, should retail investors continue to invest in the U.S.? Well, that's going to, because that would be the way around it, is to not invest in the U.S. And avoid these extra, withholding taxes. But from an investment perspective, that may make zero sense, given the vast. The United States is a gorilla when it comes to investment options. So I think their bottom line is I think they're going to have to really watch this bill quite carefully to see what actions they need to take in the future.
Kim, thank you very much for a great conversation. Kim,
now, it sounds like there's already a lot of discussion going on about this. The main concern to pretty much the majority is to ensure that all of the fake green initiatives get pulled, which is already in that bill, and let alone the stuff in which Trump has already just executive ordered, and that's that. When it comes to the tax end, there seems to be quite a heated debate about that. I've yet to see a single Republican say they're against the bill other than one, Dr. Jordanson. He's the only one who's actually came out and said something, but for him it's the debt ceiling, not necessarily the taxes. He hasn't mentioned anything about the taxes. He doesn't want to see the debt ceiling raised, and it's going to be like something like $5 trillion, and he's right against that. But he's waiting to see the numbers, especially from what Doge has already been saving and what the tariffs are bringing in, that so far it looks like the bill will break even, which means in 2 years, possibly 3, they will actually be out of the red. They'll actually be paying down debt, which would be the first time in a long time, because their rating is not doing very well down there, and that was kind of the main thing with Trump, was getting the debt under control. So we're going to move on. Eby and his Bill 15, this mining announcement just kind of keeps going south on him. Every time he thinks he's come up with something good, another scandal comes out of the closet. Another skeleton carrying a chain full of scandals. This guy is so corrupt. I can't believe BC voted for him. Unbelievable. You reap what you sow.
Development, conservation of precious water and land, and partnership with First Nations go together.
Premier David Eby says he has a plan to fast-track mining development in northwestern BC while respecting First Nations rights and conserving BC's sensitive ecosystems.
The Northwest is rich with critical minerals and metals that are the building blocks for much of the technology we rely on for our lives today.
At stake, Eby says, almost $50 billion in economic potential and tens of thousands of jobs. Key to that economic growth is Bill 15, the controversial proposed law which would give Cabinet the power to accelerate public projects like schools and hospitals and private resource projects like critical mineral mines. Some Indigenous leaders, environmental groups, and the Union of BC Municipalities say the NDP government is trying to give itself unchecked power to push through projects with limited consultation.
Now, he tried this earlier with a different bill, and it flunked on its face pretty gloriously. But this is just his way of sliding. He's pulling the typical socialist fascist kind of thing where he was trying to kind of bury it in this new bill. Like, look at me, we're doing great things. This is what Carney's going to be doing. We're going to be doing great things. And as I steamroll over everybody and sell Canadians out to huge investors, like Brookfield and the rest of those, warmongering one percenters. Yeah.
Eby's announcement in Vancouver was preempted by some of those voices at a news conference in Victoria.
Trust has been broken between First Nations and the David Eby government.
All the promises they made during the campaign last fall have gone out the window. They say, damn the environment, full speed ahead.
Eby says the government's economic plans for mining are not linked to the proposed bill. But he acknowledges that a mining project could be deemed provincially significant and fast-tracked under that same bill. 3 First Nations leaders at Eby's event, Tahltan, Casca, and Taku River Tlingit First Nation, are backing the province's plan to fast-track mining development.
We want to see our lives change for the better.
But none of the 3 were willing to address Bill 15 publicly. MLAs are set to vote on the final stage of the bill this week. First Nations leaders opposed to the bill say if it passes, they're prepared to launch legal action. Katie DeRosa?
Now, see, that's kind of the kicker that you'll find a lot with people who are married to a singular party, who are lifelongers. I use the terminology card holder because that's been a liberal thing for generations. They're a card holder. They don't care if a guy had a little wee mustache and forced everybody to raise their hand at a 45-degree angle and eliminate a certain people. They don't care. They'd still vote for that person until it was too late. And that's the problem, is you've got like those 3 chiefs standing there. They won't even answer. They probably don't even know what Bill C-15 is. They probably just sat down, had some false promises given to them, but it doesn't matter because they're full-fledged NDPers. You should never be married to a party, ever. Ever. I mean, ever. It's probably the silliest thing a person could ever do. Pure incompetence. When you don't care anymore, all you care about is your party. Parties become evil. We've seen that with the New Liberals. This New Liberal Party is nothing like the Liberal Party 15 years and past. It completely different. It has done a complete 180-degree turn. They used to be a center-left. Now they are a so far left over the cliff screaming full fascism while they drag the country down with them. This C-15 is evil. It gives them way too much power. Way too much power. We're supposed to live in a democracy. And every day with these NDP and these liberals, they just keep tearing it away. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. That's probably the best thing about the prairies. We don't do socialism. We're not into it. We like a free market society. We're tired of being crushed and having our rights taken away. Moving on down. And we've got Ontario having battles as well.
The economy through development in Ontario's north.
Its goal is to expedite critical mineral and mining projects, but critics say it would weaken environmental rules and First Nations rights. CTV's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Siobhan Morris has the details.
Stop Bill 5! Stop Bill 5!
Outside Toronto City Hall, a rally against provincial legislation intended to speed up mining in the Ring of Fire and expedite other big projects by creating special economic zones.
And a Churches Act, it basically allows his government to build wherever and whenever, regardless of any municipal or provincial laws.
The Protect Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act has infuriated environmentalists, civil liberties groups, and First Nations.
Should this bill proceed in its current form, we will be idle no more.
A warning of legal and on-the-ground action if the government goes ahead.
There will be, closures, blockages of mines, roads.
The Premier.
Now, Sol Mamaka, I'm not a big fan of his he's an NDPer. But he's done something in the past that I have to give him credit for. When he went to get sworn in, he refused to give allegiance to the crown. He refused. That right there earned him, as far as I was concerned, a small feather. He actually stood up to try and better Canada. And then it's too bad that he's in lockstep with the Socialist Party. He does one thing where it's like, I want to get rid of the monarchy, I refuse to pay tribute to the king or the queen, but yes, socialism's okay as long as it doesn't infringe on me. But you can infringe on anybody else, just not on me. I don't know. But I had to throw that out there. I had to give him credit for that. Now, that was a while ago when he got sworn in, and it stuck with me. I just thought, wow. Now, that's impressive. That's impressive.
Dismisses objections to his government's bill.
There's opposition with the radical environmentalists. Not everyone else. People want jobs.
That's an idiotic thing to say, and it's so irresponsible.
The Minister of Energy and Mines now says changes are possible.
We can continue to work in good faith with First Nation leaders to strengthen the bill, to get it right. We're open to making those improvements to the bill. We already have made some, but I think there's some more work to do.
But in a second day of committee hearings on Bill 5, First Nations chiefs express the tone of dialogue leaves them wanting.
And so one party puts in writing that I can do whatever I want and you can't hold me accountable. That's not a mutual, respectable relationship.
The government maintains more mining in the north opens the door to new economic opportunity.
These communities have no road access in a shrinking winter road season. These are top of the list items for those communities.
First Nations leaders agree clean drinking water, better housing, and getting off diesel are vital.
We need all these things, but it's the how.
The government isn't saying what kind of amendments it's prepared to make to Bill 5.
I got a kick out of everything that they just said, right? Getting off diesel, and I mean, boy, we ever got the wrong federal party for that. I'm probably going to end up doing a future episode here on the amount of energy it takes and the sheer devastation to mine critical minerals. It's an environmental nightmare. And the technologies that they're using for it are the quick and easy technologies, which use piles of different compounds and acids to break them down and then compound them, separate them in order for them to process them. The whole chemical mining end, as far as I'm concerned, and I know mining. Trust me, I know mining. I've actually invented some mining gear. I know mining. The chemical end of it is just disastrous. Absolutely disastrous. And like I said, the amount of land disturbance that has to be done in order to get at these critical minerals is extreme. And the quantities that we're going to need to just implement 10 or 15% of what these zealots dream is going to completely decimate all of the northern tribal lands. Gonna happen because they're on this green mission because they think for some reason the gas of life is bad. That's their excuse. By the time people start actually catching on and seeing the damage that's being done because of this CO2 hate, I'm hoping it's not too late. We're causing more damage trying to snuff out CO2 than any good could possibly come. Period. Take that to the press. There are other chemicals and emissions we should be, way more concerned about. And chemicals needed in order to get at these rare earth minerals. It's incredibly sad. It really is. Moving right along. This I found quite interesting. It's a little off the beaten path, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going through this, and I just wanted to share it because it's happening. And especially right now with the housing market and the inflation in housing prices, people are owing... It gets to the point where the house's value is worth more than the person can actually pay. So the insurance gets higher than what the mortgage rates were for the house. And in this instance, it goes crazy.
How many homes in this area have been assessed at $2?
Unfortunately, it's 6. I believe it's 6.
Including this one here behind us.
Yeah.
The properties in the Chilliwack River Valley were deemed worthless and unsafe due to a landslide risk after an atmospheric river rolled through the province in November 2021.
Breaks my heart that these people are having to go through this.
One of the homes assessed at just a toonie belongs to Chris Rampersad. During the torrential downpour, a landslide stopped 5 meters short of his home. Last summer, he was told by the province he didn't qualify for compensation or assistance.
And the province will not be providing financial aid for landslide-related impacts to your property.
The district and Rampersad were under the impression the government was working on a solution, but says it's been crickets. Rampersad says there's one way to fix the issue.
First, the government said there's no work to be done to stabilize the land. The only solution I see would be for them to buy back these properties, take down the structures on the property, and secure the land somehow to protect the road and the public.
Makahonic says responsibility falls on the government to help owners whose properties are deemed unsafe.
They've said, hang in there, be patient, we're working on solutions. I mean, the regional district, this is just not something that we could do.
From here, they can connect with the regional district, with the federal government. The provincial programs don't cover the kind of impacts that they have had to their properties.
Makahonic has requested another meeting with ministry staff, and Rampersad now lives part-time in Abbotsford. But with an assessed property value of $2 and a landslide risk, he says if the government doesn't step in, he'll never be able to sell.
What I think I'm going to lose is close to $1 million, which I'm still paying for, and there's no asset there.
Emily Lazatin, Global News.
Yep. That's a sad state of affair. Now, personally, in cases like this, that insurance company should be held liable. It's amazing to me how they can nitpick certain things out with the help of governments. Now, I can understand a lot of these people who get flooded out and then their insurance pays for them to build a brand new house and they build it in the exact same spot. And then they get flooded out 10 years later. And then they're screaming because they have to pay X amount of money for their insurance. And then when they finally get it all settled, and usually tax dollars roll in to help them, they build their house in the exact same spot. And then 10 years goes by. Now, I've seen this my whole life. It's the silliest thing ever. Hello. If you can't afford the insurance, the taxpayer sure as hell shouldn't be held up to try and forfeit more money for you to build again for the exact same thing. Move. You're in a bad spot. Maybe look into the dams that are around you that are causing it. Maybe look into other infrastructure, how they've changed certain rivers and streams, or maybe vote for better politicians. If the climate does it and it's a cyclical event, you're in the wrong spot. Now, this guy, I did a little bit of back checking on the area. It's like the first time in 60 years that they've had landslides in this area. So it's not like it's a normal thing. This guy's insurance should have picked up the tab. The government should have forced the insurance companies to do something. That's my opinion. Let me know how you feel in the comments. Moving on. So, the whole bread scam that went on and got buried, and of course was, oh, they're going to pay out, we're going to make them pay, rah, 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 rah. Here's your glorious settlement.
Yeah, it really has. And in terms of what it means for Canadian shoppers, Lena and Bakari, it means that some Canadian shoppers might actually be getting a little bit of money back sometime soon. Now, this settlement was reached last year, but as you mentioned, it was just approved by a judge today who called it fair and an excellent idea, this $500 million class action lawsuit settlement.
$404 million to be paid by Loblaws and its parent company.
Terms of price fixing, what this basically means is that most competitors get together and decide on a price, which ultimately usually makes things more expensive for the consumer. And it's alleged that that's what happened here.
$96 million to be accounted for through 2017 gift
in
card
terms
program.
of this bread price fixing. But we're talking about something between 2001 and 2021. So basically at this point, what that means is
those eligible for funds must have bought bread between January and December 2001. Now, who in the hell keeps their receipts for bread? Really? How are you going to prove that? This whole thing's a farce. These companies are laughing their ass off right to the bank. This is an embarrassment. Cops should have walked in. People should be doing time. There should be bigger fines. And how about considering where we are with the food banks? How about whoever doesn't come forward with their receipts, whatever's left, goes to the food banks. And it should be way steeper. I mean, considering their profit margin was something like $1.4 billion, and they're only getting charged like half of that. And that's what we know of. I mean, really? Craziness.
Any Canadian who shopped at Loblaws, for example, and bought packaged bread between January 2001 and December 2021 can possibly get some money back. How you prove that maybe you bought a loaf of bread that was packaged back in like 2002, there's still a lot of questions to be answered. We put that question to our retail analyst, Bruce Winder, and he also said there's still a lot of questions to be answered. Take a listen.
When this thing first broke around 2015, Loblaw offered, I believe, $25 gift certificates or gift cards for people. So there's a lot of people who got those. And then there's a whole bunch of people in the millions who filed for a class action lawsuit with a legal firm. And this is really what the $500 million is about. So after legal fees, the remainder will be split, among the millions of people who filed for that.
Now, Bruce Winder also says his biggest question is what about the other parties involved in this alleged price-fixing scheme? Because obviously it takes at least two to tango, and Loblaw is really the only one and its parent company to really be named in this class action lawsuit. That name came out back in 2015. So again, still a lot of questions to be answered, but this settlement has now been reached, Lena and Bakari, which means quite a few Canadians will possibly be getting a little bit of cash, a little bit of extra cash sometime soon. Back to you.
All right, CP24's Lindsay Biscaya. Lindsay.
That's just ridiculous. It's just, it's just embarrassing how corporations get away with what they do. My last little clip here. This is quite interesting. This is a frustrated Air Canada pilot, and he goes on a rant to his passengers while they're stuck on the tarmac. It's priceless.
It's costs the company a lot of money. It costs business people a lot of money.
Delayed and disillusioned, an Air Canada pilot vents to passengers stuck on the tarmac at Vancouver International Airport.
Since we got the time, if you want to write a letter to your MP and tell them what's going on.
Can you hear them laughing?
Maybe they could address this problem.
The problem, a shortage of air traffic control workers. Delays and cancellations at YVR have been mounting for weeks, leading to this rant captured by a CBC reporter.
We believe that there's a lot of evidence that the people in charge of air traffic control in NAV Canada are keeping, like the air traffic controllers are keeping the numbers low to keep the overtime up.
A charge denied by Nav Canada, the private nonprofit that operates air navigation across the country. It is in the midst of a major recruitment blitz to ease its labor crunch. In a statement, it said, "We leave no stone unturned in supporting a candidate's success. As a result, we refute any suggestion that controller trainees are disqualified from training in order to protect overtime." The pilots' union says the shortage is causing problems from coast to coast.
Most people that have traveled, I'll say, have noticed a delay or of some sort somewhere across the system, whether it's in YVR or elsewhere.
Smaller airlines find themselves particularly vulnerable.
Nobody likes getting delayed, and it is often the air operator that is blamed for the delay.
This Indigenous-led airline flies from YVR to Vancouver Island and reports delays nearly every day.
So we're getting delays anywhere between 20 minutes and 2 hours. And when you are operating a 20-25 minute flight, that's significant.
There are about 2,000 air traffic controllers in Canada. Their union says hundreds more are needed to clear these planes for takeoff. John Hernandez, CBC.
Now, the biggest thing with all of this is the wages. Now, air traffic controllers, 10 years ago and prior, it was known to be one of the top 5 most stressful jobs in the world. And with the advancement of technology, it's gotten a lot easier because there's a lot of different protocol these planes do by themselves. All different types of warnings, and they communicate with the towers, and so the job has become a lot less stressful. But these companies have been slowly taking advantage and not giving them the proper pay, and they've done this to pilots as well in the last 20-25 years. Pilots used to be, that was way up there. Like, it wasn't like a doctor, but it was up there. You got paid very well, especially if you were, qualified enough to do intercontinental, and the best paying were the danger pay, where you were either a firefighter, where a pilot that would airlift water, and for really, really remote, dangerous areas, like flying in Alaska, mountainous areas, Himalayan, stuff like that, where there's huge peaks sticking out of nowhere, fog's always around, and you got to be really, really keen and good at your job. But the way that it's been going, they've been slowly not giving raises, and as a lot of the older have retired out of those positions, they hire the new ones at a much lower rate, making the job not really sought after anymore when they can find much better paying jobs and be home. The glory's gone out of it. It's not a thing anymore. Nobody likes being crammed in like sardines. It's lost its panache. And it doesn't help when you're living in a country like this socialist country, where inflation has skyrocketed so high that everybody's wages are 25 years behind where they should be. So you add that into an account as well. So I have heard rumors, I don't have any proof, but I have heard rumors, and I've witnessed a lot of them through, of course, just me paying attention to all the stuff, that they have actually been purposely doing that for overtime because they need money. They don't want to be there working overtime. Nobody really wants to have to work overtime. They do it because they need the money. And that's kind of what's been going on. And they've been allowing them to get away with it. And this has kind of been happening. This happens in the hospitals. There's a lot of different fields where they do this. And they burn themselves out because they're just trying to get ahead. They're just trying to be successful. And elbows up, they voted in the same darn party that's caused the most havoc and devastation in the last 40 years on our country. It's a crying shame. It really is. Well, you guys, I'm going to call that an episode. I've mentioned it on my last episode. I have just released some merch. Please check it out in my stores. I'm finally figuring out the digital software that I need in order to design my own merch. So I've only got a I've got a pile of stuff out there, sweaters and some hats and some cups and some other stuff, and I worked out just a couple little sayings that I kind of use all the time, and I've been up for a long time, going over all of these different softwares, and I think I finally picked one. I'm kind of happy with it. It's still very complex. There's a lot to learn. It's just one more thing I've got to learn in order to do my job. And yeah, if you guys are interested, and I hope you are, because I do make a percentage of that, it'll help me grow my channel, and it looks good. And I made sure that I got a distributor who deals in good quality stuff. I make less money, but at least I know the products are going to be good. And I did, like I said, I did a pile of research on this. I haven't actually seen the sweaters. I've gone off of just a lot of different other YouTubers and other social media kind of people, as well as called and actually talked to a lot of these other companies and people I know who are in the field, so I could get their idea on thread count and, you know, all the quality and poundage and all the rest of it that goes with good material and good quality. And in the meantime, I've been trying to keep my prices as low as possible. I am going to be doing a whole lot more. I'm actually going to be putting out, I'm hoping in the next 4 or 5 days, another complete little separate line, just dealing with the West. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And if you are, punch that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time, you've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm Alias Tagay. Stay informed.